while the rest of the attendees join in, I'm just going to start with an intro of myself, of Netcore, and go from there. Thanks for joining again. This webinar on habit forming products. In this, we are going to talk at a high level about how companies have built habit forming products and how you can build similar products and take them to the market, and what are the factors that we need to keep in mind when we take such products to the market. Right? Why certain things, even if you do everything right, why things can fail, succeed, etc. Quick intro. I am Ashwin. I switch between growth, product, and other functions at Netcore. I'm also a product coach. I work with multiple startups, largely helping them figure out product management as a function, and hiring and training the product team, course correcting them, and so on. Right? Over the last decade, I've worked in product across companies like Zynga, Sportskeeda, etc. mentioned on the slide. I started out as a product manager at Zynga on a couple of their largest games, managed revenue for a couple of their games around 2012, 13, etc. And since then, I've been working on Sportskeeda, where I was the first product hire. And post Sportskeeda, I've been largely dabbling in startups, in gaming, in content, and in SaaS. With the last of this one is Hansel.io, where we build product lines to just 1 second. Where we built product lines to targeted at product managers, where you can use our product to nudge users within your app without involving engineering, like a no-code product experience platform. Hansel was acquired by Netcore in 2020, and currently the whole product line is available as part of the product experience suite at Netcore. Netcore is, as you might know already, one of the largest marketing technology players in the country. Been around for more than 2 decades. We send around, I think, more than 10 billion emails per month from the platform. And the product lines include not just email marketing, email automation, but also other product lines around push notifications, WhatsApp notifications, analytics, churn management, etc. So over the next hour, we are going to talk about habit forming products, how we build habits in general, and then jump into how we use that, what we know about how human beings form habits, and how we are currently, a lot of products are using that information to build their apps so that it becomes a habit for you to use their products. And then we look at how that fits into everyone's lifestyle today and the challenges as we take products to market. Quick start is the basic idea about how we form habits. There are lots of models around this particular topic, and I'm picking the simplest one out there, which is from Atomic Habits, where if we keep doing the same thing again and again, it forms a habit. And when we say like keep doing the same thing, usually there is a cue or a trigger, something that starts us to do this habit. If I take eating as an example, right? You feel hungry, you have a response to that, which is you eat, and the reward is we no longer feel hungry, right? For fitness, you wake up in the morning and essentially like go through your exercises. The reward is you feel healthier, right? And essentially, if we keep doing the same thing over and over again over a long period of time, it becomes a habit for us. The secret sauce here is consistency, in the sense, if I like most of us start with our fitness routine, but end up not following that over time, and we stop after a while. This is largely explained in this chart here, where we are seeing, let me pick the laser pointer. Yeah, where initially the results are not that evident, but when we keep doing the same thing and again, over time, the results are exponential in the way we form habits, beyond which you will no longer need a trigger or a cue to go through that motion. It becomes a part of who you are. Right? So this is how we form habits consciously, this exact same process has been suggested to us because this is what we do subconsciously. Like most of our habits on a daily basis are not formed consciously. We follow the same thing. We keep doing the same thing again and again. And a lot of things have become our habits over time, over decades, that are not formed consciously. Right. And what I mean by that is, um, as a kid, in our first formative years, whatever we do, like whatever we are exposed to, our life experiences from the house we grow up in, to the people around us, family, work, school, the schools we go to, the content we consume as news or entertainment, all of these and many more things like these, thousands of factors like these, have contributed to building who we are. Like when we say like, hey, this is me, this is Ashwin, what we usually do is just refer to a bundle of habits that we have formed since the time we were a kid, right? So even if and these are auto-generated, like in the sense, as we are exposed to all of these factors, our brain automatically builds the habits, follows the same process we talked about. And we talked about, hey, how do we consciously build a habit? It's the same process that our brain does, and a lot of our habits that we follow are auto-generated, and they're continuously updated on a daily basis, right? And most of these habits we are not even aware of. And given that each individual, like even if two people who grow up in the same house, exposed to the same family, same schools, etc., grow up differently, right? Similarly, like each of us have our own set of habits. There might be similar habits based on how uh, like how we pick habits of each other and so on. But largely, each individual in this case is unique, and the set of habits that we have are unique, which makes it difficult when we are trying to build habits for other people. When we try to add habits, we cannot understand an individual user completely when we are building our products, right? So when I say like mental models are auto-generated, what we mean is uh, human beings are basically creatures of habit, in the sense, let's say there is a door in front of us. We've opened hundreds of doors before this, and hence from all of that knowledge, without thinking, without taking even a second to think, we know how to open a particular door in front of us, right? And if it's a new kind of door that we are not aware of, it is at that point that we are pulled out of our no thought actions, and we start thinking about, hey, how do I do this here, right? So habits are how we actually function in the real world. If we wake up in the morning and look at each problem that we face as a new problem, then we are not going to progress a lot. We are essentially going to be sitting there facing the same problems day in, day out. The patterns that we form based on what we are exposed to, the habits that we form based on what we are exposed to, are what helps us actually function normally in the real world. And about 90-95% of our actions in our lifetime are actually more than that, are habitual, and are things we don't think about when doing something. And whenever we are pulled out of this habit, we are actively irritated. Like a lot of the time, we may not even know that we are irritated, but because of this, that is. But when any of your daily routine, let's say, is disturbed by something, even if you like the, let's say, the person or the thing that is jumping into a routine, you will feel a bit of irritation because of your habits getting disturbed. Right? And this, before I jump into the actual topic of using this knowledge to build products, a bonus productivity hack here is like, given that most of what we do on a daily basis is auto-generated for us without our conscious knowledge, a lot of our bad habits also are auto-generated. Let's say if I eat a lot of junk food, if I don't exercise, a lot of those things are built in and can be dropped. These habits can be identified and dropped quite uh, by following pretty much the same process. So we observe ourselves doing these things, and we identify the cues, like what is triggering us to do that. Like uh, um, if I have to understand what is causing these bad habits, I have to keep an eye out for the cues. What happens in the real world or internally, like hunger, sleepiness, etc. Like what is happening around me that is causing me to do this take this action on a daily basis. And the next step is to make, let's say, these cues or your actions harder, right? Consciously, in the sense there is a question. Just one sec. Yeah. Okay. Um, yes. The idea is that habits are kind of like autopilot for us. Um, yeah. Um, so keep adding questions. I think I'll get to them towards the end. But if I take a break in the middle, we can. If there are enough questions, I might even take a break and get into the questions at some point in the middle, right? Yeah. So the question was right. Like most of the time, we do operate in autopilot mode, and these are not things that we think about. Like there's no thought process going on. Should I do this right now? We don't think about that. It's just an automated action that happens for us, right? And that's really useful thing for us to operate in the real world. Yeah. Um, so yeah, back to this, like making the cues harder. Like an example here would be like a friend of mine who read this book, Atomic Habits, and then decided to reduce the amount of junk food their kid eats. So the cupboard from which the kid takes biscuits and chocolates, right in front of that cupboard, he kept a visible jar filled with grapes and dry fruits that this kid likes. And just by having this visual cue and making it harder, I have to move this and then open the cupboard, etc. The kid started eating a lot more of the items that this person wanted her to eat rather than go for junk food, right? Just adding these minor triggers once you identify the cues are are great starting points to drop these habits. Right now, back to the actual topic. Yeah. So given that each individual is unique kind of with respect to the habits that they have, when we are trying to build new habits in people, or when we are trying to address that I'm going to target people with these habits, with this new product, etc. How do I approach this? Is through patterns, right? Like most of us pick habits out of each other, in the sense people around us. There are lots of studies around habit forming in relationships, where if you are a couple and one person in the relationship becomes obese, there is a 57% likelihood of the other person in the relationship becoming obese as well, and vice versa. If someone in a relationship loses weight a lot, then there is a 33% chance of the other person losing weight as well. And there are lots of studies that have been done over time where we pick habits of each other, and a lot of people spending a lot of time together, like in any organization in general. People will pick habits of each other a lot. And what essentially we see as an organizational behavior or culture is down to uh, individual habits that people in that organization, with some people having more influence than others, of course, but individual habits of people in organizations is what essentially becomes organizational behavior over time. Right? So next step is, how do I use this all this info, like to build products? Like how does this help me build anything? Right? This model. Uh, this again, there are quite a few models that have been built on top of this basic habit forming cycle. And the most famous part here would be this. Let me run a quick poll here to just understand um, how much I should get into the details, or should I stay at a high level or jump into some more detail. So this is from a book essentially called Hooked, where Nir Eyal like observed companies which were building these habit models into their products consciously or not, including Zynga when I was working there, and he had listed out this as a model. Um, yeah, I'm looking at the numbers. Got it. So not many people are aware of this model. So I'm going to stay at some high level here. So the basic idea behind this model is, um, what we saw as a queue earlier, what we saw as a queue earlier and response and reward, right? I'm just going to say what this model, how that translates into this. So this trigger is essentially the queue. Like something happens in the real world that triggers me to go and take an action. Right? This action is the response we take. By taking this action, the next step is for me to feel that I need to take this action. There should be something in it for me, and that is the reward. And I'll get into why they've mentioned variable reward here instead of just reward. And what one other component that goes into this model is that you get the user of this product to invest something back into the product that is going to lead to the next trigger, to the next time that this user opens the app, right? You get the user to do something that gives you the data or the right to ask this user to open this app again, right? And I'm going to take an example here of this model in action. So the trigger here is, let's say, an ad or word of mouth. Someone tells you about Twitter, right? And you are interested in exploring, hey, what the product is, and you install based on this external trigger, which is an advertisement, or a friend of yours telling you that, hey, there is this platform. The next thing you do is, while you install the platform, they get you to follow some celebrities, magazines, news, news organizations, etc. So you click on a few such buttons and follow 10 people, or if your friend had referred you here, you follow your friend, right? So your reward is you're getting to see the thoughts of all of these people that you just followed immediately on your screen, and that content is the initial reward for signing up, right? And the additional investment that you could end up doing is just replying to someone, your friend's tweet, or retweeting something a celebrity posted, etc. And that's what happens in your first session on Twitter, right? And then you leave, right? You have other things to do, so you leave. The next time you open the app, they do not rely on you thinking, hey, I did install that app, let me go and open it. That is almost never going to happen, even for a product as addictive, let's say, as Twitter. External trigger is you had invested something, which is you followed a few celebrities, you retweeted something, you replied to something. So the external trigger here would be new, like someone had liked your tweet, right? Or someone had replied to your thought there. Or if you had not invested that additional part, you had followed a few people. So someone from that few people has tweeted something. And they use that as a notification to tell you, hey, this person you follow has lots of new tweets. And that is something that brings you back to the platform when you receive it as a push notification on the app or emails, etc. Initially, you would get a lot of emails in the first week after you sign up on Twitter. So the reward there is, let's say someone had liked or followed you, then likes and followers are the reward. And of course, the content stays as a reward. And the next thing is they will push you to tweet something again or retweet, reply again. And that becomes the investment for the third time you open the app, right? So you have multiple triggers operating to bring you back. They don't rely on a single trigger like followers alone, which means they have a single point of failure. If I am not interested in followers as a concept, that whole system fails, right? So they have a multiple options for bringing you back, and they try to get you interested in all of these options. So there are multiple ways in which they can bring you back to the application. And over time, let's say I do this 10 times, 20 times over a month, what happens is from an external trigger, which is all these notifications about followers, the trigger here becomes internal. Like whenever I'm bored, I'm going to probably open Twitter, right? Whenever I'm unsure about something, I'm going to open Google. Whenever I'm, let's say, hungry, I'm going to open a Swiggy or a Zomato. So that's what they're going for. You can call something a habit forming product when its trigger has moved from external triggers like offers, like followers, etc., to an internal process that does not require an external trigger. And that's the goal. That's what these products are aiming for. So that's when I've decided that this is a habit for this user. Right? So, but to get there, the user has to build that habit. The user has to repeat the same process n times, and n is variable, where for different users it might take a longer time, shorter time to build a habit. So the idea is to build enough external triggers into the product, get you to invest in the product to add to these triggers. So you respond to this trigger, open the app, take actions within the app, get variable rewards like content, followers, likes, etc. And it's important because if I get the same reward over and over again, my interest in the reward goes down, right? So as long as there are multiple things I'm opening this particular application or using this product in the real world, this is not really only applicable to apps and websites. These could be applicable to any real world product. So what I get out of this following this particular process should keep me interested, and variable rewards have been proven to keep people interested, which is why you see a lot of spin the wheel kind of concepts in games and games to make sure that you're not bored of opening this app. Variable rewards tend to retain your interest in the product over a longer period of time than any fixed reward can, right? And that's the basic idea of this particular model. I'm going to talk about something that I used to do, that used to do this. Like app in the app ecosystem, you would see that gaming is the most dominant industry in apps, such that right now I think in App Store there are apps as a footer icon, and then there are games as its own icon, right? Gaming is that dominant that's no longer even comparable to any other category. It's like a super category in your App Store and Play Store. And games have remained dominant from the first year. A lot of it can be traced back to a company like Zynga or similar companies from that time, where we had created, just 1 second. Yeah, sorry about that. Sorry. So a lot of casual games are designed to create habits. Like most of the games that you have played, let's say on phone over a longer period of time, you would see that all of them follow a very similar pattern. Like you will see that they will try to get you to experience a lot of things on the day of install, or in the first week. They will get you to open the app a lot more. But in steady state, in week 2 or over a longer period of time, they will make sure that you don't open the app more than 3-4 times a day. You don't lose interest over time in the app. So it's all constrained to the point that you do open the app at particular points in your daily life, only like 2 times or 3 times a day, but regularly on a daily basis over a longer period of time. From gaming to something like a Duolingo or language learning, etc. And each session within the app, every time you open the app, based on what kind of app it is, if it's learning or gaming or education, etc. Based on industry, the time that they would want you to spend in the app might differ, but largely for most apps, which fall into the entertainment category broadly, the session would be somewhere between 5 and 15 minutes is what they want you to spend in each session, but they want you to come back multiple times in a particular day, right? And you would see that they actively discourage you from spending hours in the app, right? After a point of time, it's almost like kicking you out of the app, right? And casual games are great at doing this. Some game mechanics that they use to do this are on the screen. I'm going to start talking about, say, something like a Farmville, where this concept of building a habit is built into the game, as is the case with Candy Crush, or in this case Clash Royale or Clash of Clans. Initially in Farmville, on day 0, you get like lots of crops that can be harvested in 10 minutes, 30 minutes, etc. And they get you to open the app a lot more in your first day and then your first week. But over time, you will see that you get a lot more area where you can plant a lot more, but you also get crops that are more beneficial to plant. but take a long time to harvest, right? That reduces the number of times you open the app. This is one way in which one, let's say, mechanic that is available to me as a game developer that I can use to uh, design how you come back to my application, right? This is active design from their side to make sure that you are following a set pattern in how you use the app, not just not just the game. And this is also true of Candy Crush, where I think even the founder has given an interview on this, where the life concept is to make sure that you don't get too addicted and just spend your life there on Candy Crush. Um, you can only like lose a level 5 times, and then you have to go back and come when you have refilled your lives. Similarly with Clash of Clans and Clash Royale, where you have this concept of unlocking your reward. So when you battle, you get these treasure boxes, and these can be unlocked on day zero. The boxes you get or have smaller rewards that can be unlocked in 5 minutes, 30 minutes, and over time you get like one day a treasure boxes, things that get unlocked over 2 days, 3 days, etc. These are all designed specifically to build these habits. And even if I can battle when all of these is full and I'm not going to get any reward from it, the habit that they're building is to get these rewards so that I can progress in game. So people will fill this slot and then leave the app. Right? That's a behavior they're actively building into the application. In some cases, this is also a very powerful monetization tactic. Let's say I'm free on a Saturday, I want to spend more time there. I can't. So I might even, let's say, unlock unlimited lives in Candy Crush on that day, right? By paying money. And that's a very powerful monetization mechanic as well. And that should be used sparingly. And it will be like a high cost kind of a thing, so that fewer people pay, but you get paid a lot when people do that. Um, so that's the basic idea. Like a lot of, while in gaming, this is more obvious that we have built these models into the platform. In other entertainment spaces, like in the case of Twitter or in any other product that you use in daily life, which is not an app, these are less discernible, like at the outset. But when you look deep for any product that works, any product that you are using as a habit on a daily basis, you will see that this model applies, right? And a lot of it is actively built or designed into the product itself. Um, so yeah, like a lot of casual games use this, but only very few end up becoming habits, making this successful habit kind of, right? So that comes down to how strong or weak. One of the factors there is how strong or weak the habit model is that you have built into the product. Um, so how do we define strong or weak? It's essentially based on these three um, variables: trigger, action, and reward. And there is a very nice model that someone else has built for us to understand this easily. Like this is from behavioralmodel.org by Dr. Fogg. So the idea here is, hey, when do we respond to a trigger? Like how powerful is a trigger is going to define how many times I open the app, and how many times I open on a regular basis is going to define if it's going to become a habit or not. So how powerful a trigger is based on how easy the action is, which is why fitness is a difficult habit to build, and something like a gaming is an easier habit to build. So how difficult it is to do a particular action, and how motivated am I about the reward. Right? These are the broadly the two factors that's going to decide how far or how effective a trigger is going to be. Right? If I start here, let's say if my motivation is high, I end up the prompts end up working. If it's really easy to do, my prompts end up working. In the middle, most prompts fail. Right? So even in the case of something like an e-commerce, right? Where my trigger is, if I take my push notification as a trigger, I want people to open the app. Um, my motivation can be high. My ability is not that high. Let's say if I don't have a lot of disposable income, I'm not going to buy something just because someone asked me to buy something. But the idea is offers come in here to improve my motivation in using this platform. And the better the offer is, the more motivated I am. And even if my ability to do is kind of low, if things are harder to do, if the motivation is high enough, people will end up doing it, right? And the hope that a lot of these businesses have is that over time this becomes a habit and it becomes intrinsic, like now from an external trigger like offers to an internal trigger where, yeah, I need to buy something, then that's the platform that I go to. That's the expectation that these companies have. And the more interesting corner of this chart is the other extreme, where even if my motivation is quite low in doing something, if things are easy enough for me to do, I might start doing it, right? And that's a much controlling how much motivated my users are is far more difficult and costlier compared to how easy can I make it for someone to use this product. Right? That's entirely in our hands. And hence, this is a concept that's helped like apps like gaming dominate the App Store and Play Store over the years. But even in other products, like the easier the steps are to build towards building my habit, the more likely is it that I'm going to end up building that habit, right? Yeah, so I'm going to quickly take a couple of minutes talking about, let's say, things you could do here in your real world product, like not something you are building now, but in, let's say, in a company that you're working now, where the product already exists. What you're doing is launching new features. How do I make that easy to use, right? And I'm just going to add a couple of tips there based on what I work on. Like I work on nuts theory at Netcore, and I'm just going to get a tip from there. So take the example of this, staircase / escalators. A lot of people could end up taking escalators because that's the easier option. If I want more people to take the stairs, it's either because, let's say, the escalator is crowded, hence my motivation to take that is less, or let's say if you've blocked the escalator, then that's an easy way of pushing people towards the staircase. They will not be happy about being blocked, but they will end up taking the staircase because that is their option. This is what happens, let's say, when we use things like pop-ups in our websites and apps. Users hate pop-ups. We all know that. If we measure the metrics there, 95% of the users are just going to close it even before understanding what it is that you're telling them. And that's expected. They have a habit. They've opened your website or app for a particular reason, and you're blocking that experience for them, right? What they are here for, which disturbs what they would do without thinking at all, which is habitual. And hence they get irritated, and hence pop-ups have been blamed over the years for bad user experience. On the other hand, what we can do using something like a nuts theory is what this theory tells us is, hey, if there are multiple options in front of me, regardless of what is the easier option to do, if one of the options is even highlighted slightly compared to the other options, people start taking that option, right? So just by drawing footprints, in this case, if you would notice that more people end up taking the stairs. This is also true in metro stations in India, in Bangalore, Delhi, etc., where there are no words saying you have to stand here, you have to go this way, etc. But just by following all these arrows and lines drawn on the ground, we end up following a lot of the rules that are set for us, right? That's very simple nudging theory. Just very subtly, not forcing the user to do anything. Everything is open, all three options in this case. But just because something is highlighted, without thinking, habitually, we start following that option. There's an experiment that the city of Copenhagen did in Denmark, where there was a problem with littering, people not taking trash to the trash cans. So what they did were, among a lot of experiments, including finding people for littering, etc. One of the things they did was just drawing footprints to the nearest dustbin from all the main thoroughfares where fluorescent footprint is kind of visible a lot more than other colors. So they found that this was the most effective experiment, reducing littering by 46% in some closed measurement that they did. And this got a lot of worldwide attention for nuts theory as a concept. And right now, about 80 different countries, including India, have a nudge unit as part of the government, encouraging citizens to save water, save electricity by nudging them subtly like this to do stuff, right? And this translates into your product as well. Right? This is an example from Google Pay, which ran a Go India campaign where you collect tickets and you travel to different cities and you win scratch cards and money, etc. At any point, based on what your next step is to progress in the game, they would use subtle tooltips to push you without blocking the rest of your experience. Just because they are highlighting it a little bit, a lot more people end up taking that route, right? And this is the product kind of that I've spent the last 3 years on, where you can deploy tooltips like these without code from a dashboard, right? And if you're interested, you can drop me a message later, and we can get into more details with respect to the product, right? So yeah, so we built products using this model. We have evaluated all the motivations, ability of people to do. We've built out this, and we are like very ready, saying, "Hey, this is ready. I'm going to now attack the market. I have a product that works, and theoretically, all of this is correct. I'm even, let's say, using some of these nudges to push people correctly within my application, and I'm taking this product to the market." Right? What happens? Right? A lot of the time, we even if we do everything correctly up till this point, your app will lose, and that's because most users have limited time in a day. All of them already have enough habits to fill up that day. So you are going up against some existing habit that the user already has, whether it's a habit they've built or whether it's something that's being built for them, where they operate in autopilot mode. But that's what's happening in the real world. Your game or your gaming app is not going up against another gaming app. That's not the competition. The real competition here is what is the user doing when they're bored, right? Anything that the user does when they're bored becomes your direct competition, and you're trying to replace that with a habit of playing your game, right? And that's not a easy thing to do, right? Yes, I need to build this habit forming model within my app. I need to make sure that there are enough external triggers to bring people back to my application, a plan where it becomes an internal trigger over time, and we identify what that internal motivation is: hunger, boredom, quest, like not being very sure about things, etc. Whatever else is relevant for your product. All of that you can do, right? But if you're going up against something the user cares more about, your product is going to lose. And the thing here is, this is not something that happens all the time. This is what happens most of the time. And I'll get into what the exceptions are in some of the next slides. But at this point, I would just want to run another poll. And get your thoughts on, have you used a model like this before, and has it worked for you, right? Habit forming model in your app, and has it worked for you, right? That's broadly the question, right? Awesome. These are great numbers. I'm going to share this with you in a minute. Yeah. Just going to drink water. While you answer this. Okay. I'm assuming that's the end of the answering. So I'm going to stop the poll and share results. Right. Most of you have not consciously built it. And some of you have, about 30% of you have built, and it's roughly worked for half of you and did not work for the other half, right? And now we are going to talk about the 15% of answers where people said it didn't work, right? We're going to jump into some of the reasons why it may not have worked for you. So yeah, stopping this. Yeah. So when we say like, hey, like, why is it difficult to go after something that the user is doing today? Like, especially if they're not really aware of most of their habits, which is the case with all of us. should be easy to change something you don't know, right? But the idea is, this is a very well-known concept in marketing in general, like for advertising, etc. Customer inertia is a very strongly considered concept in marketing while coming up with like how I'm going to take a product to market. While in product management, we don't think about this that often, right? Inertia is essentially the resistance to change. I keep doing the same things again and again till there is a stronger force that moves it out of, like stops me from doing the same thing again and again. Right? There is a quote that's all attributed to Voltaire, where it says where he says like history never repeats itself, but human beings always do. Right? So we keep repeating the same things on a daily basis, and this existing habit that we are targeting is something I've done every day, let's say for a decade or more in most of these cases. Right? You're taking something new and saying you stop doing that and start using this product instead. And unless like that's a strong ask for any product, forget a app or a website, but anything in the real world, like even if I'm selling something um, like a bicycle, right? Everything, anything that I'm taking to the market, this is applicable. Customer inertia is a very strong concept and needs to be considered while taking our product to the market. um, while they try it out, right? So if we advertise strongly, give strong offers, and get people to try things, they will try it out, but they will not know why they're irritated. The primary reason, even if your product is great, right? A lot of people won't like it because it's changing something on their in their daily routine, especially if it does, um, and takes time out of my day. They will make up some excuse in their head uh, to cover for this resistance to change. They're not going to say, "Hey, I don't like this because it doesn't fit into this." A lot of us don't even realize that. We'll be like, "I don't like this. I'm not sure why. It's just not great." Or this offer is too. There must be some catch here. I'm not going to explore this for now, right? As a side note, there is a Terry Pratchett book, Mott, that could be an interesting read on this concept. He's taken inertia as a concept and written a book about it, where death's assistant forgets or chooses not to take a particular life, but the rest of the world just continues in its path as if that death has happened, even though that person is alive and walking amongst them. That's a kind of like different take on it, but the underlying concept is the same. We want to go on the same path we have always been on, by default on autopilot mode, unless there is a very strong force that changes us from this path. And that's just how humans operate. Like we would like to believe that this is not the case with us because we are all smart people. But for anyone, this is kind of the case. And the more we break this, and the more present we are in the moment, the more our productivity, etc., is going to be. Right? That's a strong um, 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 part of, let's say, productivity training, etc., is being more present in the moment, doing a lot more things by just thinking about it and taking that decision actively. There is a Daniel Kahneman book that also focuses on this, where he explains system one thinking, which is autopilot, and system two thinking, which is things you do more consciously or intentionally. And the more you do the second kind of things, the more you are in control of what's happening around you, and the more better you respond to things. Right? Yeah. Coming back to the topic. So yeah, so there is customer inertia. People have been doing this same things for years. I'm building a product that has to go and change this. So how do I overcome this inertia? That's the first question, or broader question, right? The hint here is, of course, like a lot of these habits that we are going after are not conscious and can be removed. And even if we remove, a lot of people don't realize we have done that. We just have to make sure they are not irritated. Right? That's the goal when we are doing this. Um, so yeah, back to this. The goal, I mean, the key here is most of the time. So in what cases do we actually beat customer inertia? Is there a model for that? There are lots of models. The one I think about in my mental model is Maslow's hierarchy, basic this thing, and there are several variations of this hierarchy itself that you can look at. And the one you most relate to, you could probably use that as the guide. So I replace an existing habit with my product when my user cares way more about my product than the habit they're than the habit that they have to replace, right? So if I'm going after something like, hey, you don't eat, instead of that, do this, right? Dieting plans as a product. Like I'm a nutritionist. They are one of the toughest jobs where you're getting people to stop eating the things they like, and that's a very difficult thing to do because you're going after something people care about deeply, right? And the higher it goes on this pyramid, uh, the the habit that, like, essentially your product, as the lower it is on the pyramid, it's better. The habit you are replacing, if it's higher in this pyramid, it's better. Most of the time it's the other way around, and hence most of the time our app fails, right? If I'm building an app for people to become the best version of themselves by through exercises, through mindfulness, through better eating healthier food, all of that goes at the very top of the pyramid. Self actualization, the desire to become the most that one can be, and we are going up against strongly entrenched habits, and things are going to fail, right? This is essentially the reason Duolingo, actually someone from Duolingo, I'm not sure who, talked about in a TED talk where they were saying, like, for the streak feature, it is important for them to build other things around the learning rather than focusing on the learning alone. Because if I just go with the self-actualization goal where I don't have the necessity to learn a new language, but essentially it's a good thing to do. I'm becoming slightly better in some way than I was before. I'm going up against all other kinds of entertainment that I could be doing in that time frame, and it's not an easy challenge, right? Which is why they rely on gamification a lot to bring you back to the application. Because by chance, if they don't do that, if they leave it up to you to open the app, right, you're not going to open that app, and that then that really will, and that's why all of the gamification around Duolingo is very strongly part of the design of the app to bring you back to the application, right? So yeah, this is probably like a simple model for you to consider. Um, the other easier options, right? A lot of the time we don't have this choice. We are working at companies that operate higher up on the pyramid, going up against strongly entrenched habits, and changing the product is not in our control, or we are more passionate about something higher up on the pyramid and we're building something in that regard. So how do we go after these habits? Is by not directly going after it, right? And don't make users think it's just common thing that's common UX saying of sorts. Like the less people think, the more they're on autopilot, they will do whatever is in front of them a lot of the time, and don't make users think is largely used from in that aspect on this slide. One way, just try to steer them on autopilot without bringing them back to the real world. That's a not a great option, but it works, right? So that's one. The second thing is accounting for real world habits in your product or feature building. Don't take on habits like sleeping or eating, etc. Account for them and figure out what other things that your target audience, specifically, let's say if you're going after everyone in the world, then the patterns for habits, etc., are finite. You can only say like most people eat, sleep, go to school, go to work, etc. But more targeted, your target audiences. Like I'm going after, let's say, single, or I'm going after mothers who have multiple kids who pick up their kids from school. Right? Something as if I have that in my mind, then accounting for their real world habits where they are going to take this trip every day, and I'm going to target that in my messaging, advertising, etc. Let's say there are automobiles that are marketed to this segment, right? So you're accounting for real world habits, and let's say specific kinds of vans are associated with a family where you're going to school, picking it up, uh, and other things that happen in your daily life for that user persona, right? So accounting for real world habits is a great way of figuring out gaps between stronger habits that you can take, or you can make the real world habits better, easier. Right? That's another way of going about it. Um, and the third option is more like a tip that we used to do at Zynga, and a lot of companies do this today. So when you're taking a new product to the market or new feature to the market, if I take something that's 100% new, like the user has never seen this before, this is going to blow their mind. Most of the time, that will fail. Right? So what Zynga used to follow here was to take an existing improved new model. So at least one third of this new product or feature is something the user is familiar with, right? Farming, let's say I take Scrabble in the real world and give that to users as words with friends in the digital world. So I take something that exists, people are familiar with. So it doesn't feel like, I'm changing something in my life at all. I'm playing Scrabble. I used to play Scrabble before this. Another one third of the product is taking something that's there but improving it better. Let's say I'm playing online but with my friends in a social way, in asynchronously, like they can make a turn, I can make, like I'm taking something that I do. I have to travel to this guy's place to play Scrabble before. Now, all of us can be wherever we are, in office, in schools, we can still play over the phone, right? So one third of it is something I'm already completely familiar with. One third is an improved version of the new of an existing habit, and one third of it is novel. Like novelty factor helps, but not a lot. Like if everything is novel, then there is no familiarity. It feels like something new that I need to pick up instead of a game I already am kind of familiar with. Right? So new parts of it is new, like power ups and words with friends, where I can do double the score for a particular turn, etc. Some new things that I can play around with within the application. And this is a model we do a lot, which is why you also see things like Ludo, things like Rummy working really well. But a lot of very innovative games will fail because this learning curve is a lot more. Right? That's one more way to reduce the learning curve, to make people think less and they start adopting the product or feature within your existing product a lot better compared to taking something entirely new to the user. And the last, but probably the more important tip on this slide, is to not expect people to change a lot of things. If I expect users to change something drastically on day one, the higher likelihood I have of getting my product failed. The goal would be to take the user to a new habit, but with smaller steps over a long time frame, right? And this goes back to the initial slides where we talked about consistency, right? So if I get users to do something, however small it is, over a long period of time, that becomes a habit, and that habit will grow exponentially, and you will then be enough of a part of this user's life for you to push for stronger habits, right? And one of the things we need to keep in mind when you're talking about smaller steps is to make sure that these steps are easy to do, or users have very high motivation to do these. So all of the things we discussed must be like considered for this part as well. But the consistency is a very strong factor. Like things like what customer inertia does, or what doing something consistently does, is basically compounding over time. Even the small activity that I do compounds into a very powerful habit that I can then use to steer people towards the thing that I want them to do, or I can then take on some of the bigger habits that I have. Right. So when Reed Hastings a few years back said sleep is our competition, became very controversial. But that's the idea. Like they've pushed everything else. Like all the smaller habits have been replaced by Netflix. Right now, the only reason Netflix is not being used a lot more in a lot of their existing users is because people need to sleep, right? And that's where it stops. But then, yeah, some people take on sleep as well, right? And a direct lead from that would be uh, technology is now not regulated like cigarettes are, like in 1965 US. And this is an interesting article that you can probably go back and read. It's by Ian Bogeston, I think, The Atlantic, in 2012, back when apps were becoming a thing, mobile phones, smartphones were becoming a thing. So the idea here is like in 65, like 40 or 50% of Americans used to smoke. And it was just a thing. It's just life, right? It's not something people do as a thing other than life. It's just part of my life, right? From a point like that, we have arrived at today where I think a much smaller percentage of people smoke in the US. But essentially, like, yeah, a lot of work had to go in to bring it down, right? It was an epidemic at some point. It was harmful for people. And with this power that a lot of us have, now that everyone has phones in their pockets, we can reach them with our products anytime. We can build habits. We understand how to build habit forming habits, and a lot of people are using it on a daily basis today. Um, so it's our responsibility kind of to make sure we are not using this to build bad habits in our users, and use this far more responsibly. A lot of companies don't, and that's a problem that we are going towards over time. Yeah. But essentially, yeah, for the people in this particular seminar, like when you start doing this, like keep this in mind. Like we have the ability to influence a lot of people, and we need to do that a little more responsibly overall. Yeah. So just as a, I'm just going to stop here, and please add questions in the Q&A section, and I'm just going to go through them one by one. And answer them right now. Yeah, the first question from anonymous attendee is Ambit is kind of like an autopilot for us. Yes. So the idea is that's the whole idea behind our auto-generated habits. We do operate on autopilot mode for most parts of our day. Anudeep has asked if I suggest habit formation along with gamification to make it stronger. Definitely, like I was talking about Duolingo, where gamification is what they used to bring people back to the application. Uh, Gamification, in a lot of cases, people don't realize why they are doing it. Like gamification leads to increased engagement is the reason essentially that they quote. But essentially, what's happening is you're gamifying things, you're bringing people back to the app as you're trying to form a habit, right? If you do gamification right, you're basically getting the habit formation perfectly, because games have been doing this forever. But you have to be aware of why you're doing it, and take all the other concepts around, let's say, the how powerful my triggers are, etc. In gamification, let's say Duolingo introduced a streak, they could have introduced 100 features, but streak is what worked because the motivation is stronger. Like I have a 7-day streak to come back on the 8th day. And that will keep them going. I think there are people out there with 3,000 day streaks or something along those lines that they've built ever since the app was launched, and so on. So gamification is a very powerful concept that can help you achieve some of the things that we discussed today. Right? How can we cater to the needs of the users? Probably from the user or not applicable. Yeah. So a lot of the time, I mean, this is us going into Steve Jobs' route when we talk about comments from the user not applicable in our product or services are. So yeah, we have a vision of what this product is. The market has a need. How this fits there is going to have clashes. A lot of the time, our vision is not immediately obvious to someone who's starting to use the product, and they are going to, let's say, ask for features that don't fit in with your vision, or leave comments around that, like where they don't like something because of a reason, etc. But you built it for some other reason entirely, right? So. Like we discussed initially, like every individual is unique. The idea is going to be like, regardless of how awesome your product is, like an iPhone was there, and there is a good section of people who hated it when they launched it, right? That just doesn't work for some people, and that's always going to be the case, right? So yeah, like comments from the users are not always applicable in our product or services, as long as we are strong about, like we understand the basics, like why we are doing this. Like in this case, like if I'm just thinking I'm going to form habits, without looking into any model. This is one way of looking at it, but there are lots of ways. But without looking to any of this, if I just build gamification into the product and people hate it, we probably should listen to them because we don't understand why we are doing it or the basics or exactly the steps that are going to lead to this end user behavior. But the more we understand the basics and we are sure about what we are doing, then yeah, comments from the users are sometimes not applicable. You can ignore because you understand why you're doing something and you understand where the user is coming from and why it's not relevant for you. And another question here is from anonymous attendee. Can you give me an example of not going behind the obstacle but going around it? Yeah. So going back here, Netflix is an example there. The competition was always going to be sleep for Netflix, but that's not where they started, right? Like you're not giving people 20-hour content to binge on to start with. Essentially, they're building with user behavior where there's shorter content, 20-minute episodes. The focus would have been a lot more on that are released once a week, etc., to build habits like television used to do. But slowly, now that they've achieved that habit of getting people to open Netflix on a regular basis, now they are like releasing 10 episodes at a time, even for some shows like where you can binge, and trying to go for extend the time you spend on the application. That's probably one thing that I can immediately think of. Examples from my experience where you saw impact and cases where you didn't see impact. Got it. So in one of the games at Zynga, back at Zynga, there was an existing game with existing user behavior, but we tried, the team working on that game tried a new concept that didn't really fit in with the way that the users were using the app. Right? And this is all hindsight in the sense after it failed, if you're able to go back and see, okay, this is why it failed. While building, we were not looking at a lot of the factors we should have looked at. This was about 9 years ago. And if I'm looking at, let's say, at Sportskeeda, when I was there, like one of the things I wanted to do was get users data. So I put a login, like saying, hey, people coming to this website, please sign up. So I can send you like app stuff, I can send you emails, newsletters, bring you back on a regular basis, etc. Right? But I did not consider that users don't. There's not enough motivation. Like the trigger was there, saying sign up to get all this updates, etc. But the motivation for signing up was not that high. And of course, it was not an easy sign up. I was not just getting an email ID. I was getting people to say enter a password, verify their email. At that point, it was pre-OTP days. But yeah, it's not very easy thing to do. At the same time, the motivation is not very high, and hence the trigger failed. Right. So we then moved on to other ways of getting it after learning from that experience. But yeah, that's an example of something I did where I didn't see the impact, and this was kind of why when we look at it. There's another question. Would you happen to know a framework for categorizing habits based on the habit difficulty of changing them? I think this could have been before the slide on Maslow, but this is it. Right. This is a framework I use for categorizing habits based on the difficulty, exactly based on the difficulty of changing them. Fits right into the question. Right. So in my head, this is not a very what do you call it? It's not it's not all math. It's not something I can just put into a model. You can, but accuracy will not. I mean, high accuracy model. I don't know if anything exists. But the idea is this broadly covers the idea. Like when someone pitches an idea, like a new startup founder I'm meeting says, hey, this is what we are building, and this is how I expect my users to use it. One of the things I immediately think of is, hey, like this is how I expect or when I expect users to use it. What is the user doing right now without this product? In that time, for that function, all of that. are those stronger than what this product brings to the table? And that to me is an immediate red flag, right? If it is stronger, right? And that's one way of probably like thinking about it. Metrics to measure them, not really, but you can essentially come up with your own model for measuring this. There a lot of these are not comparable in the sense, if I take something like a food and compare it with something like a friendship, it's not really like something you can just put on a spreadsheet and go. Yeah. Take on wantedly pricing. Okay, this is an interesting question. Karthik is asking, what's my take on wantedly pricing product costlier so that the next best alternative is purchased? Does it really work? Yes, it does. All the time. Almost every single thing you're subscribing to right now is probably using this concept in some way or the other. Started out, I think the most famous example for this is from The Economist, where when they introduced digital subscriptions, long before I think most other publications did, people were, they correctly guessed that people would not be interested in paying a lot for digital. They had a physical magazine that people were paying for and would continue to pay for, right? So to increase the people who are subscribing to digital, right? What they did was they priced digital only at a very low price. I think about $49 or $40 a year back then, and the physical magazine was at $125, and physical plus digital subscription to both was also at $125. So they basically, just by pricing it that way, they almost eliminated this concept of anyone who's signing up for a physical magazine only subscription. I'm either signing up for digital only because it's 1/3 of my physical magazine price, or I'm subscribing to both, right? So the idea is like, just by pricing it that way, they were able to get nearly everyone to sign up for a digital subscription in one way or the other. And over the next years, they would have realized that I could just read this 1 week earlier on the website instead of waiting to get my magazine in hand. The magazine becomes the second product in the head of someone who would not otherwise have even considered a digital subscription when they started the subscription, right? So that's probably the most famous example of what we call anchoring effect in that case. Like, give a price of $125 alone for the physical magazine, so that like you've anchored it. That's the price, and now digital is free. So I'm just going to do that price. But yeah, anchoring effect is almost omnipresent. A lot of people do it badly, in the sense there are publications right now, like for subscriptions again, where you say, reading one article, pay me so much, almost like a monthly number, and then for a month you pay only this almost the similar amount. That doesn't work, because people see that and they realize that you just want me to pay for the monthly thing, and hence you're just pricing your one article price a lot, and that model will not work for obvious reasons, right? You're doing it, you have to do it in a way that it makes sense to the user, like in the earlier example. Yeah, several features user until. Yeah, okay. So we have a question from Andri, which is about their career portal app. Got it. Yeah, like when people are unemployed, they use the career portal app. When they're employed, they don't, right? That's the problem. How do I remove that? Or how do I get people to use it more, even when they're probably employed? That's one question I'm taking from there. The second thing is, they add bad reviews because they're not hired. Yeah, so that is largely, I think I would assume, it's a UX problem, in the sense that like asking them if they are hired and getting their feedback on what happened, etc., would mean that they move the bad review to that part instead of giving bad review for the app overall. And that's a common problem with a lot of App Store, Play Store, UX as well, where they're reviewing their experience with specific vendors in the marketplace, even compared to and they're not reviewing the product. So the question is not very clear. But you can work around that by asking that question within the app, where you're collecting feedback. A lot of time people do that on Play Store, App Store, because there's no way to do that within the application, and hence they take it one step out. But if you add that question internally, saying how was your experience talking to this, did they respond, all of this, and the users feel heard, there's a much less chance of them going back to the App Store and adding the bad review there. Going back to your earlier question, and this is a very interesting question. I think this is something LinkedIn faces as well, right? At some level, like if I'm looking for a job, I'm going to be on LinkedIn, and I'm not looking for a job, why am I here? Right? A lot of features. I think that's a platform you should definitely. I mean, you would have already considered, but look at from this point of view of the number of things I could be doing on LinkedIn when I'm employed. Like as a recruiter, I'm there. As a just a lot of people just are there for content. At this point, there are groups that they tried out. There are they bought Lynda to add education. Like you can take courses on LinkedIn. Like so many different things have been there, from upskilling to etc. Like I think about 20, 25 different things you could do when you're not looking for a new job on LinkedIn, right? So over time, you start using it for all of these reasons, rather than just for finding a job. It becomes kind of where you position yourself professionally, right? Even for this webinar, I want to build a network on LinkedIn so that I can get more people to sign up for this webinar, right? So yeah, you have a lot of reasons. You build in those reasons, and then build your product towards that. Right? That's probably all I can give as an answer to that question at this point. So yeah, how is your product helpful in user retention? Yeah, so our product, I'm assuming this is related to this example that I was talking about. So like, yeah, so to catch up others, like our product, using our product, what you could possibly do is, let's say, use a tooltip, mark it on an existing element on your app without going to your engineers from a dashboard. This is an example of improving retention, this particular screenshot, right? I am playing this game where I'm collecting tickets, traveling to multiple cities, getting scratch cards. The moment where I would lose focus if I go back to the motivation, etc. factor is when I cannot progress in the game, right? I'm not motivated enough to play because I played for 2 days, I did not progress, and my motivation level goes down, right? To avoid that, what Google does here is to push me to collect more tickets so that I progress in the game, right? And their models around what tickets I get, etc., are also designed so that I get something. I do not get nothing 5 times in a row, right? To push my motivation. So there is something that's built into the model, which gives me something. But for me to get that something, I need to collect more tickets. I need to, let's say, ask my friends, etc. And all of these activities that I can do only when I click on this particular ticket section and go in and do all of those. If I try all these other options on the screen, there are probably 6 or 7 things I could do on the screen. I would not get there, right? I'm doing other things that are not going to contribute to an increase in motivation for me to continue playing this game. And that's exactly what they're doing with this tooltip, because they know that I'm kind of stuck there, and they know that this is how I should progress. So they're just saying, hey, do it, right? And we are seeing very strong results from our customers for experiments like this, both around, let's say, from starting from onboarding to retention to engagement to conversions, where a simple nudge can improve conversions by 20%, 40%, etc., just because you're guiding them correctly. And in some cases, you're not making people think, while otherwise they are like, what do I do now on the screen? And the moment I think, what do I do now? There are 2 things to do. I start thinking, I'm not on autopilot, and people question things a lot in that mode, right? So yeah, nudges help. Just one more question here: how to define which approach is good for new product without considering market segment? For example, iPhone. Yeah, no one started. So iPhone, I would disagree that a lot of people liked iPhone when it launched, right? So one of the but it is true for a lot of other products, right? In your first release, people don't really notice it, and as and when a lot of people start using it, suddenly it becomes a thing, right? So that's exactly why I think the habit model. There are lots of factors outside this habit model that helps here. In the sense, uh, how do I get more people to like the iPhone? Is by getting them to use an iPhone, right? And there will be a lot of marketing that focuses on that, about their user experience, etc. A lot of people, lot of experiments around moving people from who are users of iPod to iPhone, etc. Like a lot of those uh, campaigns need to happen outside this model. But even if I look at this model, sorry, the whole reason we have this concept of external trigger is that on day one, when I launch my game, nobody really knows what my game is. Nobody is really interested. It's just another game, one out of a million games on App Store, right? But I need to get them to use it. I need to, of course, get them to install it. So that's through marketing, where again I use the same concept. I have my marketing message, or the in this case that becomes a prompt, needs to either have high motivation, hey, lots of offers in this app kind of motivation, or easy to do, right? Something that looks like when I have 5 minutes, I'll play, and something that looks interesting and fun. Right? Yeah, so I do this, bring people to the app, but within the app, in one session, it's very hard for me to think, you know what, I'm going to play this every day. Right? I'm probably interested, but if I'm not brought back to the app, I'm not going to continue this. There are other things that are competing to get every user's attention, and you have to build in, like after your initial marketing, etc., which brings people here to the user experience of your products. You have to keep investing in creating a lot of triggers, so that some of these triggers work for some users, and they hopefully, you bring them back to the app again and again, even if they're not that taken with your app yet. But by simply getting them back on your app on a daily basis, you're going to get that habit formed over time. Yeah. I think that's the last question I had. So yeah, I have another poll for you. So just if you are interested in learning more about the product that I work on, you can just like click yes, and I think someone from our team will get back to you, and maybe have a demo with you and showcase how you can deploy some of these, not just from our from a no code kind of dashboard. And yeah, right. So that's it from me. If you have no further questions, I'm just going to stop share and see if there are any other people raising hands, questions. No. Yeah. So I hope this was useful. I think that should have been another question. So yeah, if you found the session useful, just like maybe add in the chat, and I can answer that. Oh yeah, there are questions in the chat. Okay. Um, Good thing I noticed that. Yeah. So is gamification a strategy to induce habits? Definitely. In not just video streaming, but in almost every other field at this point, gamification is a very, very strong tool to build habits, and building habits should be the goal of introducing gamification. And when you're looking at it from the points of view of long-term habit building, like in the session today, you would see that just adding badges or something to your app doesn't work. Everyone knows that, but a lot of people still do it. But it has to be tied into your users' motivation. Why should they care about this badge? All of that needs to be thought through. And yeah, in general, gamification is great, but most people don't do it correctly. They're not thinking it through. So that's where a lot of it fails. And when gamification fails, it's largely because we don't do it right. Right? Copy of the webinar, I'm sure we will upload somewhere. I think you can follow Netcore on LinkedIn, and I think once the recording is done, we'll upload it in any of the video hosting providers. Right. Some external triggers that work like magic. Oh, that's okay. That's something I need to think about. I mean, outside products, um, in general, for eating, I was mentioning that hunger is your internal trigger. Most people don't wait for us to be hungry to eat. We see something that's tasty, we eat. Right? So that's the analogy that I have. Um, so you don't, you need to be present, right? In that sense, your user needs to see your product, and that works, right? So, for instance, some of the gaming apps, I'm not sure if people still do it today. We used to change their app icons consistently, right? You get used to the same icon. After 7 days, that icon is you're blind to that icon, to that color. Um, but if you, I think, Urvashi, if you're there, you could probably add a question to ask if people like this. I mean, like this session in the first place, and then I can ask that question as well while I answer these questions in chat. Right. Yeah. So the idea is you need to be present. People used to change icons. When back in Zynga, when we were doing Facebook games, we used to change. Yeah, there's a bookmark section in Facebook, and on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, we had an artist working on just changing that icon. Like that was part of his job. So that being like just being visually there for your user helps a lot. Things like Clubhouse changes its icons. It does a lot of things by just changing its icon. It's not doing it just with colors. It's doing it by highlighting a different person. I think every 2 weeks, it picks a user and highlights them as their profile pic as the app icon. I think that's a neat thing to do. So your icon changes at the same time. You're also building, some users are going to stick around longer just because of that. Um, yeah. So those are some uh, external triggers. I'm just calling out app icons and stuff. But in the real world of, not in an app, like there are lots of things. One of the reasons why we have a lot of codings and all of that, staying on top of mind, so that when something happens, that's the first thing we do. Q&A answers. Yeah. Well, thank you. Awesome. Thanks, Karthik. Like, it's great to see that someone. Yeah. Got it. So we'll be circulating the feedback form post the webinar. Like, I think there's an announcement from the team. We'll be circulating a feedback form post webinar and email to all of you. Like, looking forward to getting feedback on what you liked, did not like about this whole thing. So, say the next time I do this or another topic, I take some learning from that. So yeah, so even for this webinar, I think the same habit forming model helped. One of the reasons why we use Zoom instead of, let's say, other platforms was that, like, you register, you get notified, like all that, like triggers, etc., are all there on Zoom compared to, and they do it better compared to other options that we evaluated, and that's one of the reasons why we chose this platform for this. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining. I'm not sure if there's a new question, but I don't understand that question very well. There's no name, so I'm just I'm gonna wait. If you have, maybe phrase it differently. Promoting small games can lead to more traffic. Are you talking about mini games? Let's say in Google's case, they want to build, like, I'm assuming that's based on that, because that's the last thing I was talking about 6-7 minutes back. In Google's game, in Google Pay, like adding that game within an otherwise payments app, uh, I'm sure led to better numbers, because you have a lot of new users coming in because other people need tickets, they invite their friends and all of that. That's a one way of, growing what is currently called product led growth, where your growth mechanics are built into the product rather than through ads. And yeah, so you invite more people come in, and you're training them to use the scratch card game. By making scratch cards part of the game, you're training people to expect rewards from it, and you're building them towards what they would otherwise do. Like, you make a transaction, you win a scratch card, and that's part of the game as well, where you have to go and make a transaction to continue in the game at some point as well, right? So yeah, so they build the game to promote what you would otherwise do when the game is not there in the app, right? So your app activities were promoted really well in that game, and building it that way instead of just having a game that has nothing to do with the rest of your application, which in my opinion does not help. Having something that promotes what people would do, what you want people to do when this game is not there, using a game is great, right? And it could be a full-fledged game, like in the case of Google Pay. It could be like small gamification techniques, like in the case of the other examples we talked about. But all of that helps. Yeah. I think that's it from me. Unless there are any questions, I think we are done. And thanks a lot for everyone who wants to see the demo. That's like 93% of people who wants to see the demo. That's great. Cool. No other questions, so I think we are done here. Thanks a lot for joining. Hope this was useful. Please fill the feedback form that you're going to get over email. I'm looking forward to what do you think of this session. And any questions, reach out to me either through the feedback form or directly on LinkedIn. And happy to talk to you. Looking forward to meeting a lot of you and getting your thoughts on this topic as well as other topics related to product management. Yeah. Thank you everyone for your time.